I didn't think of my life as calm. I thought of it as managed. There's a difference. Calm suggests comfort. Managed just means nothing is actively on fire. That night, nothing was on fire. My daughter was asleep in the next room, backpack already by the door for school. The kitchen was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge. I was still in my uniform pants top, folded over the back of a chair, laptop open on the table where I finished paperwork I didn't want waiting for me in the morning. I'm Alicia Harper. I'm active duty, and I've learned to keep my life tight. Lists, deadlines, backups. That's how you survive in the military, and honestly, that's how you survive as a single mom. You don't leave things loose. You don't assume someone else will catch what you drop. I had just transferred bases a few months earlier. New routines, new drive to work, new grocery store where I still walked the wrong aisle looking for things. My daughter was adjusting better than I was. Kids usually do. She liked her teacher. She liked that her room had a window that faced east so the sun came in early. I liked that rent was cheaper here, and the neighborhood didn't feel tense after dark. Money-wise, things were tight but clean. Bills paid on time. No late notices. No juggling. I tracked everything because I had to. Housing allowance, regular pay, a small savings account I tried not to touch, and another one just for my daughter. Nothing fancy, nothing hidden, just structure. That structure was the only reason I'd let my sister help me in the first place. Sienna is older than me by 4 years. Growing up, she was the loud one, the one who talked back, the one who said what everyone else thought but didn't say. I was the quiet one. The rule follower. When I enlisted, she told everyone she was proud of me. She also told me I was lucky, that I always landed on my feet, that things seemed easier for me. They weren't easier. They were just organized. When my daughter was little and everything felt like it was coming apart, Sienna stepped in. She helped with deposits. She offered to handle a few things when I was overwhelmed. When I left for training years later, it made sense to keep that setup. I didn't give her free rein. I gave her access. There's a difference, or at least I thought there was. That night I was clearing emails and checking my calendar for the next day when my phone buzzed on the table. Once, then again. I didn't pick it up right away. Notifications happen. Banks batch alerts. Nothing unusual. When it buzzed a third time, I glanced down. Deposit alert. Transfer confirmation. Another transfer. I picked up the phone. At first, it didn't register. The numbers didn't look right, but my brain didn't accept that immediately. I refreshed the screen. Same numbers. I closed the app and opened it again like that might reset reality. My checking account showed 0. Not low, not pending, 0. I felt that familiar drop in my stomach, the one that usually comes right before impact, except nothing had hit yet. I clicked into savings. 0. I clicked into the account I kept for my daughter, the one I checked less often because it was supposed to be boring. Also 0. I didn't say anything out loud. I didn't swear. I didn't move. I just sat there, phone in my hand, staring, like if I stared long enough the screen would admit it made a mistake. The transfers weren't random. They were neat, clean amounts, no weird names, no foreign charges, no red flags screaming fraud. That's what scared me. I tapped into the activity log and scrolled slowly the way you do when you're hoping the next line will fix the one above it. The device information popped up under recent access. I knew it immediately. Same model phone, same location pattern, same login I'd seen 100 times before. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a breach. It was Sienna. My chest went tight, not in a dramatic way, just enough to make breathing feel deliberate. I thought about waking my daughter and stopped myself. There was nothing she could do, and nothing I wanted her to see yet. I called my sister. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Same result. I opened our message thread. The last thing she'd sent was a photo of her dog 2 days earlier with a joke about how he ate something he shouldn't have. I typed erase, typed again, then just wrote, "Call me." The message showed delivered. No response. I went back to the app. There was a banner at the top I hadn't noticed before. Small text. Easy to miss when your brain is screaming. Some transfers were still pending. That mattered. I moved fast after that. I locked what I could. Changed passwords. Called the bank's after-hours line and sat through hold music that felt aggressively cheerful for the situation. I explained what I saw without adding drama because drama slows things down. The representative flagged the activity and told me what I already knew. Some money was gone. Some might be recoverable. Nothing was guaranteed. When I hung up, the apartment felt too quiet. I finally stood and walked to my daughter's room. She was sleeping on her side hair everywhere, one arm thrown over her pillow. I stood there longer than necessary, just making sure nothing else was wrong because sometimes that's how nights like this go. One problem doesn't show up alone. On my way back to the kitchen, I checked my phone again. Still nothing from Sienna. I sat down and started writing things out. Times, amounts, account names, it's a habit. When something doesn't make sense, you put it in order and see what breaks. I thought about what this meant if it didn't get fixed quickly. Missed payments. Flags. Questions I would have to answer. Not just to the bank, to my command. Financial instability isn't just personal when you're in uniform. It's something people pay attention to. I didn't want to assume the worst, but I also wasn't going to pretend this was an accident. The transfers were too deliberate, too complete. My phone buzzed again. For half a second, I thought it was her. It wasn't. Another alert. I looked at the screen, thumb hovering, as if I could slow it down by waiting, then tapped into the app again, scanning the numbers, the pending status, the access log, still trying to figure out how something this clean could feel this wrong while the room stayed exactly the same around me. The cursor blinked at the top of my notes while my phone sat face down beside the laptop, like it might do something on its own if I gave it enough time. I flipped it back over and checked again. Still nothing. No missed call. No text. Just the same clean transaction list that refused to explain itself. I stood up and walked the length of the kitchen, then back again. Not pacing, just moving. That's another habit. When your brain needs time to catch up, your body fills the gap. I poured a glass of water I didn't drink and left it on the counter. I opened the fridge, closed it. Everything in the apartment looked exactly the same, which somehow made it worse. I sat back down and pulled up every account one by one, not because I expected something new, but because skipping one felt irresponsible. Checking was empty. Savings was empty. The account tied to my housing allowance showed the same thing it had 10 minutes earlier. I took screenshots of everything, saving them to a folder I named with the date instead of something dramatic. Drama doesn't help later when someone asks for proof. I logged into the credit card account next. No strange charges, no cash advances. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. It meant this wasn't sloppy. It meant whoever did this knew exactly where to look and where not to touch. I checked the access permissions again, even though I already knew what I'd find. My sister's name sat there like it always had. Authorized. Verified. Added years ago, back when survival meant saying yes to help and hoping it stayed help. I thought about the timing. The transfers didn't hit all at once. They were staggered just enough to slide under automatic alerts until they didn't. That wasn't panic behavior. That was planning. I unlocked my phone and tried calling Sienna again. Straight to voicemail. No ringing this time. Just immediate silence. I didn't leave a message. Anything I said out loud would sound worse played back later. I opened our shared family group chat, the one that mostly stayed quiet, except for birthdays and random updates. I typed her name, then erased it. Typed, erased. Finally I wrote, "Has anyone heard from Sienna tonight?" The message sent. Read receipts popped up for 2 people almost immediately. No replies. I closed the chat and set the phone down again harder than I meant to. My daughter padded into the doorway a minute later, half asleep, hair stuck to one cheek. She stood there for a second, watching me like she was checking for something off. "Why are you still up?" she asked. I looked at her face, then at the clock, and realized how late it had gotten without me noticing. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "True enough. Did I wake you?" She shook her head and walked over, climbing into the chair next to me. She didn't ask what was wrong right away. She never did. She learned a long time ago that adults talk when they're ready. I pushed the phone a little farther away from her and closed the laptop halfway. "Go back to bed," I said gently. "I'll be there in a minute." She studied me, then nodded and slid down from the chair, dragging her feet just enough to show she wasn't thrilled. When her door closed, I opened the laptop again. I pulled up my calendar and scanned the next few days, already thinking through worst-case logistics. If the money didn't come back fast, I'd have to move things. Delay payments. Make calls I hated making. None of it was impossible. It was just exhausting. What bothered me more was the pattern. This wasn't someone dipping into an account out of desperation. This was someone emptying everything in one sweep and not bothering to leave a buffer. That wasn't borrowing. That was exit behavior. My phone buzzed again. This time it was the family chat. An aunt replied with a thumbs-up reaction which didn't answer anything. A cousin wrote, "She was fine earlier." Another message followed almost immediately. "Probably asleep. Don't stress." I stared at the screen, rereading those words, until they stopped sounding like reassurance and started sounding like avoidance. I typed, "She has access to my accounts. They're empty." Then I deleted it. There was no version of that sentence that wouldn't start something I wasn't ready to manage yet. Instead, I wrote, "Please let me know if you hear from her." I locked the phone and set it face down again. I went back into the bank app and scrolled farther down the activity log, past the transfers, past the routine deposits, back into older history. Nothing new jumped out, but I noticed something I hadn't before. The access checks. Not transfers. Logins. Small ones. Spread out. Over weeks. I leaned back in the chair and let that sit. This hadn't started tonight. Tonight was just the moment everything cleared. I opened my email and searched my sister's name. Old threads popped up. Casual stuff. Memes. A forwarded article about something she thought I'd find funny. Nothing that looked like planning. But then again, planning doesn't usually announce itself. I checked my credit monitoring service next, half expecting something else to be wrong, just because that's how these nights go. No alerts, no new accounts, no inquiries, clean, for now. That for now lodged itself somewhere uncomfortable. I finally stood and walked back to my daughter's room, sat on the edge of her bed and watched her sleep for a moment. She'd kicked the blanket off again. I pulled it back up and stayed there longer than I needed to, listening to her breathe, letting that steady rhythm do what it always did, and pull me back into something solid. When I returned to the kitchen, I picked up the phone and unlocked it, already knowing what I was about to do. I called the bank again this time, asking for a deeper review. I asked questions I hadn't asked earlier. About reversals. About authorization. About how quickly a hold could turn into something permanent. The representative explained what she could, careful with her wording. Some funds were likely gone. Some were still in motion. The sooner everything was documented, the better my chances. I thanked her and ended the call. I stared at the wall for a second, then opened my notes again and added a new line at the bottom. If she doesn't call back. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. The list was already long enough, and the night wasn't done asking questions. I noticed her name missing before I noticed anything else. It was a small thing easy to overlook if you weren't already on edge. I opened my sister's profile the way I'd done 1,000 times before, mostly out of habit, and the page didn't load. Not an error. Just blank. I refreshed once. Same result. I backed out and tried again, then checked another app. Her photo was gone there too. No status, no recent activity, just an empty circle where her face used to be. That's when the word finally settled in my head, not as a thought, but as a fact. She hadn't just gone quiet. She had stepped away on purpose. I checked the family group chat again. No new messages. I checked my call log. Nothing. I checked the location sharing app we'd set up years ago for convenience. Her dot wasn't frozen. It wasn't moving. It wasn't there at all. I sat down slowly this time, like my body had decided to conserve energy. People disappear in stages. First they stop answering. Then they stop being visible. Then they stop being reachable. Sienna had skipped the messy middle and gone straight to the clean cut. I called her husband next. It rang longer than her phone had. 4 rings, 5, then voicemail. I didn't hang up right away. I listened to the automated voice tell me to leave a message. Then I ended the call without speaking. I didn't call again. I checked my email and found a message from my mother that had come in while I wasn't looking. No subject line. Just one sentence. Have you talked to your sister? I stared at it, then typed back, I'm trying. I didn't add anything else. Anything more would turn into a conversation, and I didn't have the bandwidth for one that would circle the same excuses. I thought about calling the police and immediately thought better of it. Missing person reports aren't magic. Adults are allowed to leave. Especially adults who haven't been gone long and haven't left behind obvious signs of harm. I knew what the questions would be. When did you last speak to her? Does she have a history of this? Could she have just needed space? All reasonable, none helpful. What wasn't reasonable was the timing. You don't empty someone's accounts and then decide you need a digital detox. You don't disappear the same night every dollar moves. That's not space. That's strategy. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother calling. I let it ring twice before answering. Have you heard from her? She asked without saying hello. No, I said. There was a pause on the line, the kind that usually meant someone was deciding how much to tell the truth. She was stressed, my mother said finally. You know how things have been for her. I closed my eyes and pressed my fingers against my forehead. She took all my money. Another pause. Longer this time. She wouldn't do that, my mother said too quickly. She did, I said. It's not missing. It's transferred. Well, she said slowly, maybe there's an explanation. That word again. Explanation. As if the numbers on my screen were waiting for context before they decided what they meant. I need to know if you've heard from her, I said. Not why she might have done it. No, my mother said. But calling the bank was a bit much, don't you think? I laughed once, sharp and humorless. I didn't report her. I protected myself. You always jump to procedures, she said. This is family. That landed harder than it should have. I ended the call before either of us could say something permanent. I sat there for a minute, phone in my lap, feeling the weight of a choice I hadn't fully made yet but was already being judged for. There's a specific kind of silence that comes after you hang up on a parent. It's not loud. It just takes up space. I opened my laptop and pulled up my unit's reporting guidelines, scrolling through sections I knew well enough to recite. Financial irregularities, external pressure, situations that could compromise judgment. The language was dry, intentionally so. No drama, no assumptions, just thresholds. I hadn't crossed one yet, but I could see it. I saved the document and closed it. My daughter wandered back into the kitchen this time, fully awake, carrying her sketchbook like it was armor. She climbed into the chair across from me and started drawing without saying anything. After a minute, she looked up. Did she call you back? No, I said. She nodded and went back to her drawing. Kids are good at absorbing information without demanding resolution. It's a skill adults lose somewhere along the way. I watched her for a moment, then picked up my phone again and checked my bank app one more time. The pending transfers were still pending. The completed ones were still gone. Nothing new. Nothing better. I scrolled past the transaction list and into the settings, reading through fine print I'd never cared about before. Authorization policies. Shared access clauses. The stuff everyone clicks past because it sounds like it's written for other people. I wondered how long Sienna had been preparing for this. Weeks, months, longer. The thought didn't come with anger so much as a strange clarity. If this had been planned, then waiting for her to explain herself was a waste of time. I opened my notes again and added another line. If she doesn't come back. This time I finished it. I need to be ahead of this. I didn't know exactly what ahead looked like yet. I just knew I couldn't afford to stay still while someone else controlled the next move. My phone buzzed again and my stomach tightened out of reflex. It was a message from my cousin. She's not answering me either. I typed back, "Thank you for telling me." Then I locked the phone and set it down, feeling the shift happen somewhere just below my ribs. The part where hope gives way to assessment. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet parking lot. Same cars, same shadows. No sign that anything had changed, even though everything had. Somewhere between the unanswered calls and the empty accounts, my sister had stepped out of my life without asking. And whether she planned to come back or not, the space she left behind was already forcing decisions I couldn't put off any longer. I logged into my work email before I finished my coffee. The mug still warm in my hand as the screen filled with routine messages that suddenly felt heavier than they should have. Nothing in my inbox mentioned money or family or missing people, and that almost made it worse. The system didn't know yet. I did. At work, things are simple on the surface. You show up on time. You follow procedures. You don't bring your personal life into rooms where decisions are documented. I'd done that for years without thinking. That morning, every step felt deliberate, like I was walking through something narrow and didn't want to brush the sides. I sat at my desk and pulled up the reporting guidelines again, this time not skimming. Financial irregularities tied to external influence. Sudden debt. Situations that could make someone vulnerable to pressure. The language didn't accuse. It didn't comfort either. It just laid out expectations and waited for you to meet them. I hadn't missed any payments. I wasn't in debt. On paper, I was fine. But paper doesn't show context, and context was starting to pile up. I opened a blank document and started listing facts the way I'd been trained to. Dates, amounts, access permissions. The moment I locked the accounts, the lack of contact afterward. I didn't speculate. I didn't assign motive. I stuck to what I could prove. Halfway through, my phone vibrated. A calendar reminder for a routine check-in later that afternoon. Nothing serious. Still, my shoulders tightened. I added the meeting to my mental map of the day and kept typing. By lunchtime, I had a clean summary that said a lot without saying too much. That was the balance. Enough information to show you weren't hiding anything. Not so much that you sounded panicked. I stared at the screen cursor hovering over the save button, then over the send button. This wasn't mandatory yet. I could wait. Give my sister more time to resurface. Let the bank do its thing. Pretend this was still a family issue. I saved the document and closed it without sending. At the check-in, the conversation stayed where it always did. Schedules, deadlines, a few dry jokes about how nothing ever changes and everything always does. I nodded at the right moments, answered questions, took notes. No one looked at me differently. No one knew what I was carrying. When it ended, I lingered a little longer than usual, straightening papers that didn't need it. The security officer was still there, organizing his own stack of files. He glanced up. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said automatically. He nodded and went back to what he was doing, and that should have been the end of it. It wasn't. I went back to my desk and opened my email again. Still nothing from my sister. No calls. No messages. Just silence that was starting to feel intentional in a way that didn't care about my schedule. I thought about the word vulnerability the guidelines used. Not weakness. Vulnerability. The kind that shows up when someone else knows you need something badly enough to bend. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. If my sister had taken it and disappeared, the problem wasn't that I was broke. The problem was that someone out there knew she had access to my identity, my accounts, my routine. Someone out there might assume I'd cover for her to protect myself. I pulled the document back up. This time I sent it. The response didn't come right away, which was fine. These things move at their own pace, and I'd never seen rushing help. I closed the laptop and forced myself to focus on actual work, even as my thoughts kept circling the same points. When my phone buzzed in the late afternoon, I checked it without flinching this time. It was a message from my mother. "She still hasn't called," she wrote. "I'm worried now." I stared at the words, feeling something tighten in my chest that had nothing to do with fear. "I am too," I typed back. "That's why I'm handling this." A minute passed. Then another message came in. "Just don't make this worse than it has to be." I set the phone down and didn't respond. By the time I picked up my daughter from school, the day had settled into that strange in-between state where nothing had exploded but everything felt unstable. She climbed into the car, chattering about a project she'd finished, completely unaware that my mind was running scenarios in the background. At home, she dropped her backpack by the door and headed for the kitchen, already asking what was for dinner. I told her leftovers, and she shrugged like that was acceptable. Kids are practical that way. While she ate, I checked my email again. There it was. A short reply from the security officer. No alarm, no accusations, just a request to talk. I read it twice, then closed the laptop. After dinner, my daughter settled in with her homework, humming softly as she worked. I watched her from the kitchen table, the normalcy of the scene grounding and surreal at the same time. This was what I was protecting. Not accounts. Not procedures. This. I stepped into the hallway and called my sister again. Straight to voicemail. I hung up without waiting for the tone. I didn't feel angry anymore. That surprised me. What I felt was alert the way you do when something's wrong but not loud enough for everyone else to notice yet. Back at the table, I opened my notes and added another section. Questions to be ready for. Who else had access? Whether I'd shared passwords. If there were any recent changes I hadn't mentioned. I answered each one honestly, even when the answer made me uncomfortable. When my daughter finished her homework, she looked up at me and asked, "Are you in trouble?" "No," I said, "I'm being careful." She seemed satisfied with that and went to get ready for bed. Later alone again, I checked the bank app one more time. No changes, no new alerts. Just the same frozen moment waiting to tip one way or another. I closed the app and set the phone down, aware now that this wasn't something I could keep contained inside family conversations and bank calls. The rules I lived by for work didn't stop applying when things got personal. If anything, they mattered more because someone else had already proven they were willing to cross lines and then vanish, leaving me to stand where the consequences would land first. My phone started vibrating while I was rinsing a plate, the sound sharp enough to cut through the running water. I shut the faucet off midstream and wiped my hands on a towel without looking at the screen, already knowing the timing meant something had shifted. Unknown number. I stared at it for half a second, then answered. "What did you do?" Sienna screamed the words, crashing into each other so fast they barely made sense. No hello, no pause. Just panic, loud and raw. "Do you have any idea what you did?" I didn't move. I didn't even sit down. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear, watching a drop of water slide off the edge of the counter and hit the floor. "What are you talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "You froze everything," she said. Her breathing was uneven, like she'd been running. "The accounts, the transfers. Everything's locked. People are calling me." "People," I repeated. "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "The bank. And others. You think this was just about you?" That was the first moment the air changed. Not because she was angry, because she was scared. "I locked my accounts," I said. "That's what people do when money goes missing." "You weren't supposed to touch it yet," she said, and then stopped herself too late. I let the silence stretch just long enough for the weight of that word to settle. Yet I said. She swore, sharp and breathless. "Listen, you don't understand how this works. You just made things worse." "For who?" I asked. "For everyone," she said. "For me. For you." I leaned back against the counter and closed my eyes. "You took everything I said. And then you disappeared." "I had to," she said quickly. "You would have freaked out." I almost laughed. "You emptied my accounts." "I moved money," she said. "There's a difference." "Not to me," I said. Her voice dropped, losing volume but not intensity. "You need to undo this. Now, before this gets bigger." I glanced down the hallway. My daughter's door was closed. "Good." "That's not happening," I said. There was a pause on the line, and when she spoke again, the tone was different. Calculating. "You don't get it," she said. "Your name is attached to this." I felt that land right behind my eyes. "Explain." She exhaled hard. "I used your information. Your address. Your accounts. Your military. That matters. People trust that." The room went very still. "You used my identity," I said. "I borrowed it," she said. "Temporarily. For what I asked." "Moving funds," she said. "Small amounts. Nothing violent. Nothing illegal like you're thinking." "You drained my accounts," I said again. "Because I had to clear the pipeline," she shot back. "It was supposed to go back in. With interest." I shook my head slowly. "You don't get to gamble with my life." "You always think you're better than this," she said. "Like you're above it because you wear a uniform and follow rules." "That uniform is the reason this is a problem," I said. "For me." She went quiet for a beat, then said, "They're watching now." "Who is they?" I asked. "You don't need to know," she said. "You just need to fix this." I pictured her pacing somewhere unfamiliar, phone clenched in her hand, eyes darting to every sound. The sister who used to tell me I was too careful now sounded like she wished she'd been more. "I can't," I said. "You won't," she corrected. "No," I said. "I can't. It's reported." Her breath hitched. "You told them." "I documented what happened," I said. "That's it. You just put me in danger," she said, her voice rising again. "Do you hear me? You did that," I said. "When you took the money. She laughed short and bitter. You think this ends with a report? You think freezing accounts makes you safe? I think undoing it makes me complicit, I said. Another pause, this one heavier. You always do this, she said quietly. You pick rules over people. I'm picking my kid, I said. The line went silent except for her breathing. When she spoke again, the edge was gone. I need you, she said. Just this once. Unfreeze it. Let it clear. Then we're done. I can't help you, I said. You don't know what happens if you don't, she said. I know what happens if I do, I said. I lose everything. Her voice cracked then, just enough to let something real slip through. They don't like delays, she said. They think I screwed them. That's not my problem, I said. You're making it your problem, she snapped. They know where you work. They know you won't disappear. I straightened every muscle in my body, going alert. Don't threaten me. I'm warning you, she said. There's a difference. I'm ending this call, I said. Wait, she said quickly. Just think about it. I am, I said. More than you ever did. I ended the call and stood there, phone still in my hand, listening to the hum of the fridge kick on, like nothing in the world had changed. My daughter's door creaked open behind me. Mom, she said softly. I turned around. She stood in the hallway in her socks, eyes searching my face. Are we okay? I took a breath and forced my shoulders to drop. We are, I said. We're safe. She nodded like she believed me, because she needed to, then went back to her room. I locked my phone and set it on the counter, heart steady, in a way that surprised me. The call hadn't given me answers. It had given me confirmation. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't family drama spiraling out of control. It was a choice she'd made, and now it was pressing back on her from all sides. I walked to the table and opened my laptop, pulling up the notes I'd been building line by line. Dates, amounts, access. Words she'd used on the call. I typed everything while it was still sharp, not dressing it up, not softening it. When I finished, I didn't feel relieved. I felt clear. Somewhere between the screaming and the threat disguised as concern, my sister had crossed a line she couldn't walk back from, and the space she'd tried to hide in was already closing around her, while I sat there hands steady, choosing what not to undo. The email didn't have a subject line, just my full name in the sender field, and a sentence that made my stomach tighten before I even finished reading it. It was polite in the way messages are when they don't want to look threatening, carefully worded like someone had taken time to make sure it sounded reasonable. It mentioned a transaction review. It referenced an account I recognized. It asked me to confirm my involvement. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it either. I opened a new browser window and searched the address. It came from copying it character by character like I was diffusing something fragile. The domain wasn't fake. It wasn't familiar either. That was worse. Familiar things have patterns. This didn't. I closed the browser and checked my phone. No new messages from Sienna. No missed calls. The silence felt intentional now, like she was waiting to see what pressure would do. I pulled my notes back up and added a new section. Outside contact. I pasted the email text beneath it and saved a copy as a PDF, then another as a screenshot. Redundancy calms me. It always has. At work, I requested a private conversation with the security officer who'd emailed earlier. The room we sat in was small and undecorated, the kind of space designed to keep things focused. He didn't waste time. You did the right thing documenting this, he said after scanning what I'd brought. We're not accusing you of anything. I know, I said. But he continued, your name showing up in external financial activity. Changes how this gets handled. I didn't authorize any of it, I said. I believe you, he said. That's not the issue. The issue is why your name works. I waited. People trust it, he said. Military records are clean. Addresses are stable. Patterns are predictable. That makes them useful. Useful. Not valuable. Useful like a tool. I nodded slowly. She said that I said. That it mattered. He looked up. She? My sister, I said. She's the one who did this. He didn't react, which told me he'd heard worse. Family access is one of the most common ways this starts, he said. It doesn't make it less serious. I know, I said. He outlined the next steps without drama. Preserve everything. Don't engage directly. Let any contact come through official channels when possible. This wasn't about punishing anyone yet. It was about understanding scope. When I left his office, my phone buzzed again. A text from a number I didn't recognize. No greeting. Just, "You should tell your sister to calm down." I stared at the screen, reading it twice to make sure I hadn't imagined it. I didn't respond. I took a screenshot and saved it with the rest. By the time I got home, my head felt full in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with pieces not fitting together cleanly. My daughter was at the table with her homework spread out, pencil tapping against the page in a rhythm that meant she was thinking. "Hey," I said. "Hey," she replied, then glanced up. "You look tired." "Good eye," I said. She went back to her work without asking more. I let that be a gift. After dinner, I opened my laptop again and followed a trail I hadn't wanted to think about before. I searched my name the way someone else might. Not the official stuff. The places people don't usually check. Forums, comment sections, archived pages. It didn't take long. There was a thread with my first name in the title. No last name. Just enough to pull you in if you knew it mattered. Inside were screenshots I recognized. A cropped version of my work profile photo. A blurry picture of me and my daughter at a school event I didn't remember sharing publicly. The comments weren't graphic. They didn't need to be. They were speculative in the way that makes your skin crawl. Questions about pressure points, about timelines, about how long it usually took before someone folded. One comment mentioned kids. I closed the laptop so fast my hands shook afterward. I stood there for a moment staring at the blank screen, then walked to the hallway and checked the lock on the front door. It was already locked. I checked it anyway. My daughter looked up from her notebook. "What's wrong?" Nothing, I said automatically, then stopped. "I just need you to finish up and get ready for bed, okay?" She nodded, watching me a little longer than usual before turning back to her work. I went into the bathroom and splashed water on my face, grounding myself in the simple fact that I was still here, still in control of what I did next. Panic wouldn't help. Silence wouldn't either. I called the number that had texted me. It rang once, then went to voicemail. The message was generic. No name, no confirmation. I didn't leave one. Instead, I sent the screenshot to the security officer with a short note. "This just appeared." I did not engage. The reply came faster than I expected. "Good. Don't." Later that night, after my daughter was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with everything laid out in front of me. Notes, screenshots, emails, a timeline that was starting to show shape instead of chaos. Sienna hadn't just used my accounts. She'd used my consistency, my predictability, my unwillingness to cause waves. She'd assumed I'd fix things quietly the way I always had before. What she hadn't accounted for was how little room there is in my life for pretending something isn't happening when it clearly is. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This one left a voicemail. "She's spiraling," a man's voice said, low and hurried. "And if she keeps pushing, this won't stay small." I didn't recognize the voice, but I recognized the tone. Someone trying to exit without getting pulled down with the rest. I saved the message and added one more line to my notes. Third-party contact. The picture was coming into focus now, not as a single bad decision, but as a network that had been leaning on my name like it was a door they expected to open eventually. They'd underestimated something basic. I don't open doors just because someone knocks louder. I shut the laptop and sat there for a while, listening to the apartment settle, aware that whatever came next wouldn't be handled with apologies or explanations, but with the same steady pressure that had already started closing in from the moment my sister decided my life was something she could move around without asking. I didn't answer the voicemail right away. I listened to it again slower this time, not for the words, but for what sat underneath them. The man wasn't angry. He wasn't threatening. He sounded tired, like someone who'd stayed too long in a situation that stopped making sense and was now looking for an exit that didn't involve his name on paperwork. "She's spiraling." That wasn't concern. That was damage control. I saved the message, labeled it, and added it to the growing folder that had quietly become the most organized thing in my life. Then I stood up and walked to the window, pulling the blinds just enough to check the parking lot again. Same cars. Same stillness. No reason to think anyone was nearby. No reason to relax either. The next morning started the way most of them do, with routines that don't care what kind of night you had. Breakfast, backpack, shoes by the door. My daughter moved through it all on autopilot, humming under her breath. I watched her closely not because she was doing anything wrong, but because she was the reason every choice suddenly had a weight attached to it. At work, the security officer asked if I had a few minutes. I followed him down the hallway without asking where we were going. The room we sat in was the same one as before. Same chairs, same table. Nothing about it suggested turning points. Those never look the way people expect. He didn't push. He laid things out. "We're seeing overlap," he said. "Not enough to draw conclusions yet, but enough to suggest your sister isn't acting alone." "I know," I said. He nodded. "The question now is how far you want to take your cooperation." I leaned back slightly. "What does that look like?" "It means letting us handle contact," he said. "It means you don't warn her. It means if she reaches out, you don't try to manage it." I thought about my sister's voice on the phone, the way she'd switched between panic and blame without stopping to breathe. "And if she keeps calling, you document," he said. "That's it." I didn't answer right away. He waited. "I don't want this to turn into something bigger than it already is," I said. "It already is," he replied. "You're just deciding whether you pretend it isn't." That landed cleanly. No judgment, just math. I told him I needed a day. When I got home, my phone was full of missed calls. All from family. Different numbers. Same pattern. I didn't return any of them right away. I needed to hear what they had to say without being pulled into reacting. I started with my mother. "She's scared," my mother said as soon as I said hello. "She called me last night." "Did she say where she is?" I asked. "No," she said. "But she sounded desperate." I closed my eyes. "She should be." "That's a horrible thing to say," my mother snapped. "It's an accurate one," I said. "She stole from me. She used my name. She put my kid at risk." "She's your sister," my mother said. "You don't ruin family over money." "This isn't about money," I said. "It stopped being about money a while ago." My mother sighed, the long-suffering kind. "You always see things in black and white." "No," I said. "I see consequences." There was a pause then. "You don't have to involve anyone else." "I didn't," I said. "She did." That ended the call. The next one was from an aunt, then a cousin. Different voices, same theme. Keep it quiet. Don't make it official. Handle it inside the family. Every conversation left me more certain of something I hadn't wanted to admit yet. None of them were asking what she'd done. They were asking what I was willing to overlook. After dinner, my daughter sat at the table drawing while I organized papers beside her. She glanced at the growing stack. "That's a lot," she said. "It is," I agreed. "Is it for work?" she asked. "Yes," I said, then corrected myself. "For us." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her drawing. My phone buzzed again. A text from Sienna this time. No screaming, no blame, just please. I stared at it longer than I meant to. The security officer's words came back to me not as a warning but as a reminder. "Don't manage it. Let it show what it is." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message and added it to the record. A few minutes later, another text came in. "You don't understand what they'll do if this doesn't clear." I didn't reply to that either. I sat there, hands flat on the table, feeling the old instinct rise up. Fix it. Smooth it over. Make it stop. That instinct had kept the peace my whole life. It had also taught my sister that I would absorb the impact if it meant everyone else stayed comfortable. That instinct wasn't serving anyone anymore. Later that evening, the man from the voicemail called again. This time I answered. "I'm not here to threaten you," he said quickly. "I'm trying to stop this from blowing up." "Then tell her to stop contacting me," I said. "She won't listen," he said. "She thinks you'll cave." "I won't," I said. He exhaled. "Then you need to understand what she's tied into." "I already do," I said. "Enough." There was silence on the line. "Then, if you're willing to cooperate, I can help make sure the right people hear what actually happened." "I am cooperating," I said. "Just not with her." That was enough for him to hang up. I sat there for a while after that, the weight of the decision settling into something steady instead of sharp. I wasn't choosing against my sister. I was choosing not to lie for her. Before bed, I checked on my daughter, tucked the blanket around her shoulders, and stood there listening to her breathe. That sound was uncomplicated. Honest. It didn't ask me to justify anything. Back in the kitchen, I opened my laptop and typed a short reply to the security officer. "I'm ready to move forward." I didn't feel brave when I sent it. I felt tired and clear the way you do when you stop arguing with yourself and start acting on what you already know. Whatever came out of this wasn't going to be clean or quiet, but it was going to be handled the right way, not because it felt good, but because pretending otherwise was no longer an option I was willing to protect. I chose the location because it was boring. A park near a shopping center, the kind with too many benches, and not enough shade where people pass through without really looking at each other. Joggers with headphones. Parents watching kids climb on equipment they'd outgrown. A food truck parked crooked near the curb. Cameras mounted on poles that blended into the background because no one paid attention to things that were always there. Visibility without attention. That mattered. I arrived early and sat on a bench facing the walkway, phone in my pocket, keys in my hand posture, loose enough to look normal. Across the way, a man pretended to scroll on his phone. A woman tied her shoe twice without needing to. Plain clothes. Nothing dramatic. Exactly what it was supposed to look like. My sister was late. That didn't surprise me. Sienna was always late when she wanted to control the temperature of a room. Make people wait. Make them wonder if she'd show up at all. It used to work on me. I checked the time and focused on my breathing, keeping it slow and even. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't want my body to give anything away. If I looked calm, she'd feel safe. If she felt safe, she'd talk. Her car pulled in fast and parked crooked, taking up part of the space next to it. She stepped out wearing sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. Her husband stayed in the driver's seat, hands tight on the wheel, eyes forward, like he didn't want to be seen noticing anything. Sienna spotted me and walked over without hesitation, the confidence a little too sharp around the edges. "You look fine," she said, like that was an accusation. "So do you," I replied. She sat down hard on the bench beside me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same one she'd worn for years. Familiar things hit differently when you're paying attention. "We need to fix this," she said, skipping over hello entirely. "I can't keep stalling." I tilted my head slightly. "Stalling who?" She glanced around, then back at me. "Don't do that. Do what I asked. Play innocent," she said. "You know what's going on." "I know what you told me," I said. "That's not the same thing." She scoffed. "You always do this. Act like you're above the mess." "I'm not above it," I said. "I'm inside it because you put me there." Her jaw tightened. "I used what I had access to. You gave it to me." "I trusted you," I said. "Those aren't the same." She waved a hand. "Trust doesn't pay people back." "There it is," I said quietly. She froze for half a second, then recovered. "There's nothing illegal about moving money," she said. "It happens all the time." Using my identity, I said without my consent. "You weren't supposed to notice," she snapped. I looked at her, then really looked. The sunglasses were doing too much work. Her hands wouldn't stay still. She kept checking her phone, then flipping it face down like it offended her. "Who are you working with?" I asked. She laughed too loud. "That's none of your business." "It is when they're contacting me," I said. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "They shouldn't be." "They are," I said. "Texts, emails, forums." Her face drained just enough to be noticeable. "What forums?" I let that hang. "You told them about me," she said. "I didn't have to," I said. "You did." She leaned closer, dropping her voice. "You don't understand how this started. It was small. Just helping people move funds faster. Everyone got paid. No one got hurt. Until you needed a clean name," I said. She swallowed. "Until I needed scale." Her husband shifted in the car. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. Tension radiating outward. "You used my job," I said. "My address, my consistency." "You always have everything together," she said. It made sense. "It made it easier," I said. She shook her head. "You're blowing this up." "You already did," I said. "I'm just not pretending anymore." Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again. She cursed under her breath. "You need to unfreeze the accounts," she said. "Just long enough to clear what's pending." "No," I said. "If you don't," she said, "they'll think I set them up." "You did," I said. Her eyes flashed. "You think they care about truth? They care about flow." "That's not my problem," I said. She leaned back, crossing her arms, studying me like I was a stranger. "You really won't help me." "I can't," I said. "And I won't." Her laugh came out broken. "You always pick the rules." "I pick my kid," I said. That landed. She looked away first, jaw working, then back at me. "You know they won't stop," she said. Once they start digging, this won't stay on me. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. She frowned. Here for what? To hear you say it, I said. Out loud. She stared at me, suspicion finally breaking through the panic. Say what? That you used my identity, I said. That you drained my accounts. That you did it knowing I couldn't afford to let it slide. Her mouth tightened. You're recording me. I'm documenting, I said. She stood up so fast the bench rattled. You set me up. You set yourself up, I said, standing as well. I just stopped covering for you. Her husband opened the car door halfway out, now eyes darting. Sienna, he said. We should go. She ignored him, pointing at me. You think this makes you safe? I think lying makes me vulnerable, I said. She stared at me like she wanted to say more, something sharper, something she'd regret. Instead, she laughed again, hollow and brittle. They're already watching, she said. Good luck explaining all this. I won't be the one explaining, I said. She turned away, storming back toward the car phone pressed to her ear before she even reached it. Her husband followed, not looking back. I stayed where I was. Heart steady, eyes forward, listening to the ambient noise of the park swallow the sound of their engine as it pulled away. A moment later, someone sat down on the bench beside me, close enough to feel, but not close enough to draw attention. That was enough, a calm voice said. I nodded once, fingers finally unclenching around my keys. I didn't feel victorious. I felt certain. Because somewhere between the half-truths and the slips, she hadn't noticed making my sister had said exactly what she needed to say, and the space she thought she could hide in had just gotten a lot smaller while the afternoon carried on around us like nothing had happened at all. The paperwork didn't come all at once. It never does. It arrived in pieces spaced out just enough to make sure I stayed alert. Emails asking for confirmation. Phone calls that didn't rush me. Requests framed as routine, which somehow made them heavier than anything dramatic would have. At work, no one treated me differently. That was intentional. Processes moved quietly, professionally. Accounts were flagged. Names were cross-checked. Timelines were built without commentary. I learned quickly that the loud part of accountability is what people imagine. The real part happens in offices with neutral walls and chairs that don't squeak. At home, life kept going. My daughter complained about homework. I forgot to buy milk. The trash went out on the wrong night. Normal things continued alongside everything else, and that contrast was harder than I expected. There's no pause button for real life, just because consequences are lining up. The first official notice came on a Wednesday afternoon. I recognized the sender before I opened it. The language was careful, stripped of emotion. Certain accounts were being held pending investigation. Associated individuals had been identified. Cooperation was appreciated. I closed the email and sat there for a moment, hands flat on the desk, feeling the strange combination of relief and weight settle in. Not relief that something bad was happening, but relief that it was no longer drifting. My phone buzzed a few minutes later. A text from my cousin. Is it true? I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure what version of the truth she was asking for. Later that night, my mother called again. Her voice sounded older than it had the last time we spoke. They came by, she said. Who, I asked, even though I already knew. People asking questions, she said. About your sister. About you. Did you tell them anything I asked? I told them I didn't know, she said. Because I don't. That's fine, I said. There was a long pause. She says you did this to her. I exhaled slowly. She did this to herself. She's scared, my mother said. So was I said, when I opened my bank app and saw nothing. Silence filled the line again, heavier this time. They're talking about charges, my mother said quietly. I didn't respond. When I hung up, I sat in the dark living room and stared at the wall, letting the quiet do its work. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like someone who'd finally set a broken bone and was waiting for the ache to fade. The next day, my phone rang from a number I recognized. Not my sister. Her husband. I answered. They're taking everything apart, he said without preamble. Accounts, messages, stuff we didn't even think mattered. I warned her, I said. You didn't have to go this far, he said. I didn't go anywhere, I said. I stayed where I was. She crossed lines. He laughed once, bitter. You always had a way of making it sound clean. It is clean, I said. That's the problem. He didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was flat. They want her to talk. She should, I said. She won't, he said. She thinks she can ride this out. That's not how this works, I said. No, he agreed. It isn't. He hung up without saying goodbye. That night, my daughter asked if Aunt Sienna was mad at me. Kids have a way of skipping to the core without getting lost in the details. She might be, I said. Did you do something wrong, she asked. No, I said. I did something hard. She thought about that, then nodded like it made sense. Hard doesn't mean bad, she said. Exactly, I replied. The first time I saw my sister after the park wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no confrontation. It was across a room through glass, in a place where voices stayed low and words were chosen carefully. She looked smaller somehow, like the confidence that used to carry her had finally run out of places to stand. She didn't look at me at first. When she did, her eyes were sharp searching, as if she were still trying to figure out where the misstep had been. You really let this happen, she said. I didn't stop it, I replied. She scoffed. Same thing. It isn't, I said. Her lawyer shifted in his seat. We should keep this focused, he said. She waved him off. She thinks she's better than me, she said. Always did. I shook my head slightly. I think I'm responsible for my life, I said. That's it. She stared at me like she wanted to argue, then looked away, jaw tight. The meeting ended without resolution. That wasn't the point. The point was that the story was no longer hers to control. Outside, I sat in my car for a minute before driving home, hands resting on the steering wheel, heart steady. I thought I'd feel something bigger. Anger. Vindication. Maybe even sadness. What I felt was tired. Tired of explaining. Tired of carrying other people's expectations. Tired of being told that keeping the peace mattered more than telling the truth. By the time I got home, the sun was low, and the apartment smelled faintly like dinner. My daughter was on the floor with her sketchbook, drawing something with a lot of straight lines. What's that? I asked. A fence, she said, but not the mean kind. I smiled despite myself. What kind is that? The kind that keeps the bad stuff out, she said, not looking up. I sat down beside her and watched for a moment the simple certainty in her movements, grounding in a way nothing else had been all day. Later, after she went to bed, I checked my email one more time. Another update. Another confirmation. More things moving into place, slow and unavoidable. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair, aware that nothing about this was over in the sense people usually mean. But the direction had changed. The weight had shifted. My sister had spent years assuming I would absorb the impact so she wouldn't have to. That assumption was gone, now replaced by something far less flexible. The world outside the window stayed quiet, ordinary and different, and that felt right. Because consequences don't arrive with music or speeches. They arrive the way everything else does in real life. One documented step at a time, while you're still making dinner, still showing up for work, still choosing not to look away, just because it would be easier. The quiet didn't arrive all at once. It crept in gradually, filling the spaces where phone calls used to come from, where explanations had been demanded, where I'd braced myself out of habit. One morning I realized I'd gone a full day without checking my bank app more than once, and that felt like progress even if it wasn't dramatic enough to celebrate. The investigation moved the way investigations always do, slowly and without apology. There were forms to sign, statements to review, details to confirm that all sounded the same after a while. My role stayed what it had been from the beginning. Answer what I was asked. Don't add commentary. Don't speculate. Truth doesn't need embellishment, and it doesn't benefit from impatience. At work, things settled into a new normal. I wasn't flagged anymore, but I wasn't invisible either. People were careful around me in a way that wasn't pity and wasn't admiration. It was respect mixed with caution, the kind that comes when someone sees you didn't flinch, when it would have been easier to smooth things over. My career didn't take a hit, but it didn't glide forward either. A reassignment got delayed. A training slot went to someone else. No one said it was because of what happened, and no one needed to. Life doesn't always punish you outright. Sometimes it just makes you wait. I accepted that. At home, the changes were smaller but heavier. Family group chats went quiet. Holidays became theoretical instead of planned. When my mother called, the conversations stayed on the surface. Weather, school, work, the things people talk about when they don't want to risk saying the wrong thing. I stopped pushing for more. One evening, my daughter asked why Aunt Sienna didn't come around anymore. I didn't prepare an answer. I just told the truth in a way she could carry without it becoming a burden. She made some choices that weren't safe for us, I said, and I chose not to ignore that. Is she mad? She asked. Probably, I said. But being mad doesn't make her right. She nodded, absorbing it quietly, then went back to her homework. Kids don't linger on what adults dramatize. They look for stability and move on. The financial part took longer than I wanted and less time than I expected. Some money came back. Some didn't. The bank covered part of the loss without admitting fault, which is how institutions apologize when they don't want headlines. I adjusted budgets, tightened margins, rebuilt what I could. I didn't pretend it didn't hurt. I just refused to let it define us. What surprised me most was what didn't come back. Trust, obviously. That wasn't something I expected to recover. But also a certain version of myself. The one who believed that endurance was a virtue no matter the cost. The one who thought love meant tolerating whatever came with it. That version didn't survive this, and I didn't miss her. Months later, I saw my sister again at a distance I couldn't control. Courtrooms are good at stripping things down to facts. No stories, no excuses, just records and consequences. She didn't look at me. I didn't try to catch her eye. There was nothing left to say that mattered. When it was over, I went back to work, picked my daughter up from school, made dinner. The world didn't pause to mark the moment, and that felt appropriate. Closure isn't a scene. It's a condition you notice later. We built new habits without calling them that. Two-factor authentication on everything. No shared access, no exceptions. My daughter learned how to spot things that felt off, not with fear but with curiosity. We talked about money openly, about boundaries, about the difference between helping and enabling. One night I found her drawing at the table long after bedtime. She looked up when I sat down beside her. I made a rule, she said. Oh yeah, I asked. Family doesn't get extra passwords, she said. I smiled. That's a good rule. She grinned back, satisfied, and went to brush her teeth. At work, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. How often people waved through access because it was convenient. How many systems relied on trust without verification. I didn't lecture, I just asked questions. Slowed things down. Made caution normal instead of awkward. People listened more than I expected. The story followed me in quieter ways. A coworker pulled me aside to ask about shared accounts with her parents. A neighbor mentioned a relative who always needed temporary help. I didn't give advice. I shared experience. The difference mattered. Late one night, months after everything had settled into something steady, I sat at the same kitchen table where this had started. Same chair. Same view of the hallway. Different sense of weight. I thought about the word revenge and how often it gets misunderstood. This hadn't been about punishing my sister. It hadn't felt good. It hadn't felt clean. Revenge stories make it sound like there's a payoff that erases the damage. There wasn't. What there was protection. Of my child, of my career, of the future I was responsible for, whether anyone else approved of how I guarded it or not. I used to think boundaries were walls, things you put up to keep people out. Now I understood they're lines you draw so you don't lose track of where you end and someone else begins. They're not dramatic. They're practical. They're what let you sleep at night without bracing for impact. Before bed, I checked on my daughter one last time. She was asleep, notebook tucked under her pillow, like she'd forgotten it was there. I stood in the doorway longer than necessary, letting the quiet settle. This was the cost. Not the money, not the distance. The cost was learning later than I should have that love without limits isn't loyalty, it's risk. And the benefit, if there was one, was knowing that when blood betrayed me, I didn't betray myself to keep the peace. I chose safety over obligation, clarity over comfort. And every day, after that choice, life didn't get easier, but it got honest, which turned out to be something I could actually build on. What stayed with me after everything settled wasn't the anger or the money. It was the clarity. The moment I stopped trying to protect someone who was willing to sacrifice my future for their comfort, my life got quieter. Not easier, just clearer. Family betrayal has a way of forcing that kind of clarity on you. It teaches you that loyalty without boundaries isn't love and that protecting yourself doesn't make you cold, it makes you responsible. This wasn't about revenge for me. It was about choosing safety, truth, and accountability when pretending would have been easier. If stories like this resonate with you, especially real family revenge stories rooted in everyday life, consider subscribing to the channel. These aren't just stories about family drama. They're about the choices that change everything and what it actually costs to stand your ground when it matters most.